Alright, if anyone tries to sell you any of these bikes, I want you to run and just keep running. Don't stop. Nothing crushes the thrill of the open road like a motorcycle that's more maybe than machine, leaving you stranded when you least expect it. Today's video is about exposing the 30 bikes that break down, fall apart, and leave you stranded when you need them most. Let's dig in. Number 1. The MV Agusta. I mean, they're gorgeous, but that's it. Take the F3, 675, and 800. They're infamous for their valves, which for some reason think it's totally fine to drop into the piston's party and blow the whole engine sky high. Imagine hearing that heart-stopping kaboom on your morning ride. Yeah, fun times. Then there's the Brutal series, a name that's painfully accurate because you'll be battling electrical problems, ECU failures, and sprag clutch meltdowns like it's your second job. And don't even get me started on the wait times for parts. You need a new fuel gasket? Well, you might as well start a new hobby while you wait. One guy waited 3 months. 3 months! By the time his bike got fixed, he probably forgot how to ride. Number 2, the Kawasaki ZX636. I won't wish this bike on my worst enemy. On paper, gorgeous, but in reality, a mechanical soap opera. Let's chat about the gearbox. Second gear on this thing has the lifespan of a mayfly. 1 minute it's there, and the next, gone like your paycheck on a Friday night. Rolling on the throttle in the first or second gear feels like trying to walk on a treadmill that's actively plotting your demise. Below 4,000 RPM, it stutters so hard you'd think it's auditioning for a dubstep remix. This isn't your typical oops, I slipped the clutch too fast stutter. No. This is aggressive, angry, and downright embarrassing at a stoplight. And hey, let's add some tech drama. Install a Power Commander 5 and a Dyno Jet quick shifter? Great! Well, now the bike loses power mid-throttle and starts making a noise like it's trying to whistle but forgot how. Unplug the quick shifter, it's magically fine again. It's like the bike's throwing a tantrum because it's not getting enough attention. Foot brake works, handbrake doesn't. It's a gamble every time you ride. And the engine? Screaming at 12,000 RPM just to barely overtake someone in the slow lane. Meanwhile, you're praying your eardrums don't explode before the engine does. Long story short, the ZX636 is the kind of unreliable you warn your friends about. Number 3, the Buell Blast. Designed to reel in younger riders, Harley-Davidson threw their weight behind this innovative entry-level bike, only for it to implode so spectacularly that its own designer publicly shredded it. Yeah, you heard that right. The guy who made it hated it so much, he literally destroyed it. If there's a louder warning sign than that, well, I haven't heard it. Now let's break it down. The Blast comes from some clever tricks, like a plastic body panel that's made of Surlyn. Supposedly, this material could survive drops and keep scratches hidden because the color ran all the way through. Great idea in theory, but guess what? That doesn't matter much when you're riding a bike that won't even start reliably. Owners often complain about starting issues. You push the starter, and then nothing. Maybe on the 4th or 5th try it would sputter to life if you were lucky. But don't celebrate yet. The engine had a nasty habit of stalling unless you babysat it with the throttle. Handling? About as graceful as a refrigerator on roller skates. The torque was excessive, and the brakes? Oh boy, let's just say stop was more of a suggestion. Pair that with challenging maintenance, just like removing the airbox just to reach certain parts, and you've got a bike that's less blast and more bust. Number 4, the Honda CB750. A name that echoes through motorcycle history, but before you start waxing poetic about its legendary status, let's pause. Because boy oh boy, those early CB750s, they were like that friend who's fun at parties, but absolutely useless in a crisis. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, cam chain tensioners. These things were ticking time bombs, prone to failure at the worst possible moment. Imagine cruising along, thinking you're the king of the road, only for your engine to catastrophically fail because Honda decided to cut a few corners. It's like baking a cake, but forgetting the flour. A complete disaster. And speaking of disasters, let's not ignore the early production models. You know, the sandcast ones that everyone treats like precious relics. Sure, they're rare, but for a reason. They were riddled with production issues. Honda basically stumbled through mass-producing these bikes like a toddler learning to walk. They had to overhaul the entire manufacturing process just to get it right. Early buyers? Well, congratulations. You were beta testers. Oh, and the rubber components. Honda's brilliant plans use rubber that turns into brittle, flaky garbage over time. Cam chain tensioners, primary chains, and every other rubber bit were essentially ticking time bombs. If you dug your nail into those parts and they didn't crumble like stale bread, consider it a win. Number 5. The BMW S1000. First off, the cylinder head, the heart of any engine. It's been a headache for owners. BMW even issued a recall to fix it. But guess what? Some bikes still fell apart, and that's just the appetizer. The S1000 also comes with leaking brake calipers, ignition coil failures, and cold start problems. Basically, it's a Swiss Army knife of motorcycle issues. Now we'll talk about maintenance. This isn't the kind of bike that you can tinker with on a lazy Sunday. No. You need specialized tools and a PhD in bike servicing, or just a lot of cash to throw at your mechanic. Oh, and don't even think about insurance. It's as high as this bike's red line. Fueling issues adds another layer of misery, choking the bike's performance like it's allergic to being good. Number 6, the AJS Model 31. On paper, it had all the right moves. A 646cc overhead valve parallel twin engine that could roar down the track like a lion on Red Bull. Lightweight? Check. Agile handling? Double check. This machine was built for speed, and boy did it love to flaunt its racing DNA. But here's the twist. That racing DNA was more curse than blessing. Frames snapping like toothpicks, engine seizing up mid-ride, and breakdowns so frequent you'd think it was auditioning for a soap opera. The Model 31 had it all. It was like the high-maintenance partner who's great at parties but just impossible to live with. Mechanics dreaded its arrival in the shop, and riders? Well, let's just say they became experts at pushing motorcycles instead of riding them. Number 7, the Ducati 900 SS. An L-twin beauty that sings like Pavarotti. It'll pull smoothly from low revs and catapult you forward in a symphony of mechanical whirs and exhaust rumbles. But here's the catch. Ducati forgot one crucial thing: to make it reliable. Fried stators, dead batteries, and electrical systems that give a 90s desktop PC a run for its money. This bike's electrical issues were so bad, some owners probably started carrying jumper cables as standard gear. Oh, and its handling. The marketing department might call it razor sharp, but owners would just call it quirky. The revised geometry improved things, sure, but older models had this nasty habit of standing up under braking mid-corner. Not exactly confidence-inspiring when you're trying to carve canyons. And let's not forget the suspension. Adjustable forks? Yes, but getting them dialed in was a quest worthy of an Italian opera. Then there's the maintenance. Look, it's an air-cooled Ducati with desmodromic valves. Translation? You're going to know your mechanic really well, like first-name basis, birthday gift kind of well. And the price? 8,350 pounds on the road might seem like a bargain for Italian artistry, but factor in repair costs, and it's much less a bargain and more a financial drain disguised as a motorcycle. So, is the Ducati 900 SS beautiful? Absolutely. Does it deliver visceral thrills? Undeniably. But reliable? Well, that's like asking a cat to do your own taxes. Fun to own? Maybe, if you enjoy a love-hate relationship. Number 8, Eric Buell's Motorcycles. This bike came straight out of Buell's garage with a Harley-Davidson Sportster engine, an innovative mass-centralized chassis, and enough quirks to fill a sitcom. But let's talk reliability, or lack thereof. The S1 Lightning had all the charm of a rebellious teenager and just as many breakdowns. Overheating? Check. Oil leaks? Double check. A design so tight that even sneezing near it might cause a meltdown? Yeah, you bet. And don't get me started on maintenance. Owning one of these was like dating a drama queen. Thrilling, sure, but just exhausting. On the bright side, if you're into masochism, the bike rewarded patience. That Harley engine gave off a rumble that could wake the dead, and its low center of gravity made its handle like a dream when it wasn't in the shop. But hey, dreams don't leak oil, do they? So is the S1 Lightning a bad bike? Well, not exactly, it's just complicated. Number 9, the Vincent Rapide. This British beast from the 1940s and 50s was marketed as an engineering marvel. And yeah, it was, for its time. A 998cc V-twin engine with overhead valves and unit construction, yeah, that was pretty cutting edge. Riders could zoom to speeds that had people clutching their pearls back then. But here's the thing. Owning one was like dating a high-maintenance celebrity. Sure, it's thrilling, but boy, does it come with drama. This thing overheated faster than a college student's laptop during finals. And oil leaks? Oh, it leaked oil like it was trying to mark its territory everywhere it went. And breakdowns? Well, let's just say if you rode a Rapide, you probably became best friends with your mechanic. Number 10, the Kawasaki ZX-14R, or should I say the ZR-1400 for those across the pond. The first-gen ZX-14R had a bad habit of shredding. Why? Lack of lubrication. Kawasaki must have thought maintenance was optional when they designed this thing. If you don't top off the oil religiously or slap in an aftermarket oil pump, you might as well start saving for a new engine. Oh, and cracked frames, snap motor mounts? This bike is basically a mechanical soap opera. A jaw-dropping 210 horsepower? Yeah, it sounds amazing, until you realize it's like giving a toddler a chainsaw. This isn't a bike, it's a death wish on 2 wheels. Even seasoned riders steer clear because one bad twist of the throttle could launch you into orbit. Forget your dreams of living past 30 if you think you can control it, because between higher than average insurance premiums and tires that wear out faster than your New Year's resolution, this bike will bleed you dry. And maintenance? Oh, it'll cost you a couple $100 a year, minimum. And that's before you factor in all the little repairs from when it decides to implode on you. And fuel economy? You're lucky to get 120 miles on a tank. The ZX14R guzzles gas like it's sponsored by ExxonMobil. You can tour on it, sure, but only if you're okay with stopping at every gas station along the way. Oh, and let's not forget the weight. At 584 pounds wet, this bike is a tank. Drop it, and you'll need a forklift, or a small army to pick it up. Have you owned any of the bikes mentioned already? Is it as bad as the reports say? Well, let us know in the comments section below. Number 11, Cleveland Cycle Works. This brand tried to ride the retro American wave, slapping some Chinese-made basics together and then just called it a day. And what did they get? A lineup of bikes that could have been assembled by toddlers during recess, brakes that work half the time, a dealer network that's more elusive than Bigfoot, and performance so lackluster you'd probably think that they were powered by frustrated size. Take the Heist, for example. On paper, it's a sleek little bobber with charm, but in reality, well, it'll rattle your spine into early retirement thanks to its abysmal suspension. The stock seat shocks are so bad that they've earned a reputation for busting tailbones. An achievement, if we're being generous. Riders swap them out faster than they fill up their gas tanks, often opting for custom springs just to survive the ride. Then there's the Ace, which seems slightly better, until you realize the brakes are a mismatched duo of hydraulic and drum setups. Stopping power? Let's just call it wishful thinking. Now let's not forget the electrical systems that spontaneously decide to die, leaving you stranded with nothing but your regrets. The bikes are light, sure, but with reliability, it's pretty bad. Number 12, the Yamaha R6 and R1. First up, the Yamaha R6, specifically from 1998 to 2002. This thing has a gearbox that's about as reliable as a toddler's promise to clean their room. First and second gear, practically made of butter. And those OEM clutch springs, wheat doesn't even begin to cover it. Imagine trying to shift and hearing the clunking sound of impending doom. Yeah, that's the R6 for you. Transmission problems galore, and it's not just a one-off, it's the whole vibe of the bike. Now on to the Yamaha R1. Let's start with the obvious. This is not a beginner bike. I don't care what your buddy says about toning down the power. This beast is 1000cc Overkill Express, with a ticket straight to Regret Town for anyone without years of riding experience. And let's not forget the seat height. If you're under 5'8", good luck. You'll be tippy-toeing at every red light like a circus act. And for what? To wrestle with a bike that's more powerful than most people's ambitions? No way. And then there's the sound. The R1's cross-plane crankshaft gives it a unique growl, but it's a love-it-or-hate-it situation. If you're into the traditional inline four scream, well, this might sound like a dying walrus to you. So what do we have here? Gearboxes that crumble under pressure, seat heights that alienate half the population, and power levels that are as unnecessary as a third sequel to a bad movie. Number 13, the 300cc class. The 300cc class of motorcycles is about as reliable as your uncle's weekend promises. First up, let's talk about the Honda CBR 300R. Honda, the quote king of reliability, really dropped the ball here. This bike had first-gear transmission issues and crankshaft failures that were so bad that Honda issued a recall. And guess what? Some owners still face the same problem after the so-called fix. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a sinking ship. Then there's the build quality. Oh boy, from 10 feet away, the CBR 3000R looks like a dream. Up close, that dashboard screams Fisher-Price, and the plastic panels might as well be held together with duct tape. And the brakes? Bargain bin specials. Yamaha's R3 doesn't fare much better with its floppy turn signals and lever feel that's one step above squeezing a soggy sponge. These bikes are all the same glorified scooters. Suzuki's GSX 250R, that thing is evolving backwards. Meanwhile, KTM's Duke 390 is out here showing everyone how it's done with features like ride-by-wire and a slipper clutch. And yet, the big Japanese brands just slap a fresh coat of paint on their models and then call it a day. And let's not forget size. At 6'3", I look like a circus act on one of those things. Even smaller riders often outgrow these bikes faster than a teenager's shoes. And power? Forget about it. Bring them out to Redline and you'll be rewarded with, well, a slightly faster lawnmower. Oh, and the price. These bikes cost way more than they're worth. Why shell out $6,000 for a showroom shiny R3 when you can snag a used one maybe, or invest in a Duke 390 that's actually fun? Number 14, the Harley-Davidson Dyna. Some people might be typing blasphemy in the comments section, I know, but hey, don't get me wrong. This bike has its fans, but if reliability is your thing, you might want to sit this one out. Harley, in their infinite wisdom, managed to design a frame that was so flawed that if you're hitting corners with any enthusiasm, the bike starts swaying like a drunk uncle at a wedding. You'll hear people throwing money at fixes like upgraded motor mounts, steering stabilizers, or even laser aligning the engine. But guess what? That wobble? Yeah, it's still waving at you. Now, the Evolution engine. Cam chain tensioners made of plastic. Yeah, plastic. These little guys wear out faster than cheap shoes, leading to loose chains and engine-destroying chaos. And don't even get me started on the lifters. Contaminated oil can ruin them, leaving you with an ominous ticking sound. Ignore it, and your engine's heading straight for the graveyard. Now, how about oil leaks? Because who doesn't love a bike that marks its territory? The rocker box gaskets are notorious for dripping oil like a bad faucet. Oh, and that carburetor? It'll clog up just for fun, giving you rough idling, bad fuel economy, and the starting reliability of a 20-year-old lawnmower. The suspension? Man, that's absolute trash. Number 15, the Yamaha Virago 1100. Calling this bike unreliable might be the understatement of the century. If you want lessons on how to be patient, please buy this bike. The cam bushings, they're a ticking time bomb. One day you're cruising, and the next thing you know, the motor seizes like it's auditioning for a death metal band. Then there's the starter clutch, or should I say the starter crutch, because it'll leave you stranded more often than a bad GPS app. But wait, there's more. The midshaft yoke nut can shear off, locking up the back wheel. Picture this, you're riding, enjoying the breeze, and bam, your bike decides it's tired of moving forward. That's not terrifying at all, right? Oh, and the electrical gremlins. They're not cute, mischievous sidekicks, right? They're straight-up vandals. CDI units overheat and blow capacitors like it's a sport, leaving you with a glorified paperweight. Even if you swap it out, don't get too comfortable. It'll just fry itself again like it's in a grease pan. Number 16, the BSA A65 Thunderbolt. You couldn't park it anywhere without leaving a souvenir puddle. Riders were practically wiping it down after every ride. Not for vanity, mind you, but because the bikes refused to keep its fluids in check. It's like the A65 had a pathological fear of holding onto oil. And the vibration, Riding this beast felt like shaking hands with a jackhammer. Long journeys left riders with numb hands and a deep-seated resentment. One poor bloke lost his horn bracket mid-ride because the vibrations rattled it loose. The horn just yeeted itself onto the road like it had somewhere better to be. And then the gearbox. Shifting gears on an A65 is like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. Clunky shifts, missed gears, and the occasional refusal to engage. Classic behavior. The clutch cable snapping mid-ride, it wasn't unheard of either. And who could forget the headlamp debacle? One rider hit a bump, and the headlamp decided to make an escape, shattering on the road. Turns out, it was held together by a screw barely tightened. Is that on BSA? Well, debatable, but let's face it, everything about the bike seemed allergic to staying in one piece. Misfires, fuel line splits, head gasket leaks, the list goes on. Number 17, the Triumph T140 Bonneville. A British classic, sure. Rockers loved it, rebels worshipped it, and every pub within a mile of one could hear the throaty exhaust. But you know what everyone else heard? The sound of disappointment. Because let's talk about reliability, or more accurately, the complete lack of it. First off, Lucas Electronics. The Prince of Darkness. That nickname wasn't just a joke, it was a warning label. Imagine cruising down a dimly lit road, feeling invincible, only to have your headlight flicker like it's auditioning for a horror movie. Switches, bulbs, sparks, you name it, they failed. Sometimes it felt like the bike was powered by hope and bad decisions. Then there's the carburetor situation. Oh boy, every twist of the throttle came with a surprise, and not the good kind. Dead spots, stumbling acceleration, and a total lack of confidence in corners. You're supposed to feel connected to the road, not like you're solving a Rubik's Cube every time you hit second gear. And let's not forget the vibration. Between 50 and 70 miles an hour, it's like riding a jackhammer. Comfort? Who needs it? After all, what's a numb backside compared to the sheer thrill of wondering if your feelings will survive the trip? Now, to be fair, the Bonneville's parallel twin engine had its moment of glory. When it ran right, it roared like a lion, but when it didn't, which was often, it left you stranded, pondering life choices and the merits of public transportation. Number 18, KTM street bikes. The KTM street bikes, especially the pre-2018 models, meaning the Duke 790 and the RC 390, they're like the one friend who promises to show up but leaves you stranded at the worst possible time. These bikes have persistent leaks and overheating issues that can turn a fun ride into a steamy roadside meltdown. Owning one is like playing Russian roulette, except instead of bullets, you're dodging engine failures. Now, here's the deal. KTM does amazing things with their off-road and adventure bikes. No question there. But the early street lineup, that's a different story. It's frustrating because we bike enthusiasts pour our wallets and dreams into these machines. So when the brand drops the ball, it's not just a mechanical fail, it's betrayal. If you're spending thousands of dollars, you shouldn't also need a backup bike just to get to work. Even the new KTM 1290 Super Duke R Evo has quirks that'll make you scratch your head. First off, it's top-heavy. It's like riding a motorcycle with a humpback whale strapped to the tank. Then there's the price. You're looking at $20,000 before you even add the track pack to unlock basic features. Are you kidding me? For $23,700, I could buy a Ducati Street Fighter that blows it out of the water in every shootout. Number 19, the Harley-Davidson Panhead. Oil leaks. I mean, the Panhead was so good at marking its territory. You'd think it had a bladder problem. Your driveway? Oil slick. Your garage floor? Oil slick. Your patience? Also slick, because this bike wasn't built for neat freaks. And don't even get me started on the electrical gremlins. Wiring was so sketchy that it made Christmas lights look reliable. Riders never knew if they were going to fire up the engine or summon a spark demon. And overheating? Oh yeah. That air-cooled engine was like your uncle at a summer barbecue. Just hot, sweaty, and prone to quitting halfway through the fun. The frying pan rocker arms might look cool, but let's face it, they were more style than substance. It's like Harley said, hey, let's make it pretty and hope nobody notices the flaws. Spoiler, we noticed. If you had a Panhead, chances are you also had a toolbox bigger than your bike. If you want to keep those exhaust spigots from eroding, be ready to weld or pray to the motorcycle gods, because factory fixes, they weren't going to cut it. And while we're on the topic of headaches, those external oil lines, sure, they help with cooling, but they also made your bike look like a science experiment gone wrong. Number 20, the Ducati Scrambler 62. Sure, it's got the Ducati badge, which is great for showing off to your non-riding friends who don't know better, but owning this bike is like dating someone who's high maintenance with no personality to back it up. All flash, no substance. Let's start with the maintenance costs. This thing will drain your wallet faster than a gas station sushi regret run. Regular services aren't just expensive, they're absurd. Ducati took a beginner bike, something that should scream simplicity and affordability, and turned it into an economic sinkhole. It's almost impressive how they managed to over-engineer something that should just work. And reliability? Oh boy, you think Ducati engineers spent more time deciding on the paint job than ensuring the bike doesn't overheat while you're idling at a stoplight. Heat issues are rampant, and unless you enjoy the occasional game of, hey, will my engine cook itself today, this bike might not be for you. And let's not forget the infamous side stand sensor. Imagine gearing up for a ride only to have your bike refuse to start because it's having a tantrum over a faulty sensor. Top-notch engineering here, folks. Oh, and the clutch. If you enjoy rebuilding clutches every other month, well, congrats, you found your soulmate. The Scrambler 62's clutch wears out faster than a cheap pair of sneakers on a gravel road. Ducati tried to wrap all this in a retro modern bow, but under that banana seat and round headlights lies a machine that's just not worth the hassle. Number 21, the Velocette Venom. It sounds impressive, right? Well, until you actually own one. Now, on paper, it looks great. A 499cc single-cylinder engine with smooth power delivery, designed for long, dreamy rides through the countryside. But in reality, this thing's about as reliable as a politician's handshake. Now, let's start with the engine. Now, oh, the irony of calling it refined, right? Its design was so complex that it felt like a high-stakes puzzle. One wrong move, and you're spending hours or days trying to figure out why it sounds like a tin can full of nails. And when it finally does roar to life, well, don't celebrate yet, because it's probably leaking oil like a sieve. Seriously, this bike left more puddles than a nervous puppy. And then there's the infamous Lucas Electrics. These were the electrical equivalent of handing someone a flashlight and calling it a floodlight. Problems cropped up faster than you could fix them. Lights failed, wires fried. I mean, owning a Velocette Venom meant keeping a toolkit handy and praying to the gods of British engineering every time you turned the key. Sure, it was balanced until the engine decided to act up mid-ride. Imagine cruising along and then suddenly hearing a clunk, clunk, clunk that made your heart sink. Number 22, the BSA Gold Star. On paper, sure, it boasts a 650cc single-cylinder engine with 45 horsepower. But in the real world, it's about as reliable as a politician's promise. Overheating, oil leaks, and wooden brakes that feel like they're salvaged from a 1950s pushcart. And the dash lights, practically invisible unless you're staring at them under a microscope. And let's talk shocks, or as I like to call them, pogo sticks disguised as rear suspension. They're fine for a Sunday stroll, but you turn the pace up and they'll have you bouncing down the road like a kid on a trampoline. Oh, and the dealer network? Just 10 dealers in the UK. Compare that to Royal Enfield's sprawling 180, and it's clear who's winning the numbers game. Number 23, the NSU Max. This bike boasted a 247cc overhead camshaft engine, which sounds fancy, right? It's like saying your car has a rocket engine, except this one leaked oil and lots of it. Electric gremlins? Oh, it had plenty. The wiring was so temperamental that riders probably carried a flashlight just in case the headlights decided to take vacation mid-ride. Now let's not forget the suspension system too, which was hailed as advanced for its time. Translation? It gave you a comfortable ride if your idea of comfort involved constant rattling and a chiropractor on speed dial. And don't even get me started on the maintenance. Owning this bike was like dating someone with trust issues. Constant attention, meticulous care, and it still broke down at the worst moments. Sure, at least it looks sleek. Number 24, the Suzuki RE5. Now this thing had promised a 495cc Wankel rotary engine that really sounded cool. It looked futuristic and allegedly delivered silky smooth power. But it didn't just overpromise, it underdelivered in a way that makes you wonder if Suzuki engineers were just trolling us. The engine overheated like a kettle left on high. It leaked oil like it had a grudge against your driveway and broke down so often it might as well have come with a subscription to AAA. Rotary engines are already complicated, but the RE5 took complexity and said, hey, hold my beer. Meticulous doesn't even begin to cover the level of upkeep required. You miss one detail, and boom, you're stranded on the side of the road contemplating your life choices. The bike had futuristic gauges and styling, but good luck appreciating those when you're stuck trying to figure out why your exhaust is hotter than the surface of the sun. Suzuki had to redesign the disaster within a year of launch. By 1976, they threw in the towel, proving that even they knew this bike wasn't going to make it. Number 25, the BMW R65. If motorcycles had personalities, this would be one that is an overconfident coworker who promises to crush deadlines but ends up overheating at the first sign of pressure. Born in the shadow of its big brother, the R80, the R65 tried to carve out a niche with urban riders. But spoiler alert, it didn't always succeed. First off, this bike's air-cooled engine had a nasty habit of turning into a sauna during stop-and-go traffic. Perfect for winter commutes, but hey, good luck in summer when your thighs feel like bratwursts on a grill. And then there's the infamous kicker syndrome, the Kickstarter's temper tantrum. Imagine revving up your bike only to get a swift boot to your shin. A rite of passage? More like a rite of pain. Sure, it handled decently and had a boxer engine charm, but charm that doesn't fix burnt pistons or bruised egos. Number 26, the 1986 Ducati Passo 750. Now this beauty was supposed to be the future of motorcycles, sleek, aerodynamic, and powered by a 748cc L-twin engine with a desmodromic valve system. It sounds fancy, right? Well, except it had one major problem. It didn't like to work. The Passo's electrical system, well, about as dependable as a politician's promises. And that fuel injection, more like fuel rejection. Riders often found themselves stranded on the side of the road, cursing their life choices. And if you were lucky enough to get it running, the carburation issues made sure that it rode like a drunk goat. Sure, it had style, but what good is it if it's just a garage ornament? Classic Ducati drama at its finest. Number 27, the Can-Am MX-6. Where do I even start? This thing was supposed to be a motocross beast, but it turned out to be more of a circus act. Sure, it had a 248cc two-stroke engine that could scream louder than your uncle at karaoke night, but screaming, it doesn't win races. Reliability does, and the MX-6 had about as much as reliability as a soggy paper straw in hot coffee. Engine seizures were so common, you'd think that it came as a factory feature. Now let's talk about the frame. Braking under pressure like it had stage fright. If you managed to survive the ride without a mechanical meltdown, well, congratulations, you just cheated death. But hey, at least it looked cool, right? Except cool doesn't cut it when your bike's more fragile than Grandma's China. Number 28, Matchless G3L. Now, this British single-cylinder motorcycle was the unsung hero for military and civilian riders back in the day, but it's a love-hate relationship. Sure, it's rugged and simple, the kind of bike you trust to cross a muddy battlefield or get you to the pub, but dependable? Let's pump the brakes on that. If you ever heard the joke, Lucas, Prince of Darkness, you already know where this is going. Electrical issues plagued this bike like a mosquito at a summer barbecue. You'd be riding along, wind in your hair, and then, poof, darkness. Not the romantic kind either. We're talking headlights that don't light, and a battery that's as useful as a chocolate teapot. And don't even get me started on the oil leaks. Oh, the glorious British tradition of marking its territory wherever it went. This bike was practically its own mechanic's best friend. You better carry a rag and a wrench everywhere, or you'll end up slipping in your own drip trail. Number 29, Gilera Saturno. A bike that's supposed to scream Italian thoroughbred, but often ends up crying mechanical nightmare. Sure, it came with a 499cc engine that packed a punch, but owning one felt like dating a supermodel who constantly reminds you that she's too good for you. Here's the problem. That high-performance, air-cooled engine, it overheated so often that you'd think it mistook the highway for a sauna. And don't even get me started on the water pump. It's less a pump and more a passive-aggressive suggestion that you carry a toolbox at all times. Owners didn't just ride the Saturno, they developed advanced coping mechanisms for breakdowns. And while its handling is supposed to make you feel like Valentino Rossi's cousin, it's hard to enjoy cornering when you're constantly wondering if you're even going to make it home. And number 30, the BMW F650 Funduro. It sounds fancy, right? But don't let the name fool you. This thing is about as reliable as a weather forecast from your shady neighbor. Sure, on paper, it's a dual-sport marvel. 650cc single-cylinder engine, smooth power delivery, blah, 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 right? But in the real world, it's a walking migraine. Let's talk problems. Electrical gremlins galore, your headlights might work, or they might just decide to take a vacation mid-ride. And then there's the fuel system. Clogged filters, faulty pumps, the whole circus. Imagine prepping for a long trip, only for the bike to act like it's allergic to gas. And don't even get me started on maintenance. It's like the bike's trying to relive its teenage rebellion phase, breaking down just to spite you. So which of these two-wheeled disasters is your favorite? Or did I miss one that's even worse? Let me know down below. And don't hold back. Hey, we're all friends here.